The basis of this talk is that when the old self is allowed to die, or only when the old self is allowed to die, then the new self can be born, and it can be born free from the afflictions that constrained the old. So, a few things come to mind here, or should come to mind, or maybe just come to my mind, what we can call my mind, but it's really just as much your mind as it is mine. And so, this isn't really a matter of life and death, although when we don't go through this process, when we don't embody this freedom of mind, spirit, and emotion, eventually we develop stress and dis-ease from the inability to change and cope with the environment, and that can result in physical death, which is still just an illusion anyway. So some things that could come to mind are how certain people that will constrain our personality from being who we think we should be, or who we think we really are, and how this can have a restrictive effect, obviously, because it's constraining us, but this can also have an illusory effect, or even a secondarily constrictive effect, to the point where when we permit that we can be conditioned to believe that this constrained version is who we really are, or that the cycles of feeling constrained and then coping with it in manners other than true self-expression, or expression of the true self, that become a routine, that become part of our personality, part of the way we handle other stressors, and in that way it grows basically onto us. The restrictive aspect, the contorted belief systems, like an intoxication or toxification of our own self-image from the way others may feel, that becomes embedded in the way the mind processes information and experience, and we automatically begin to lose sight of or overlook, as if it's an illusion, as if it becomes invisible almost, the original nature of how we feel and how we behave, and even the joy that comes from natural behavior, that comes from the mind, the emotions, without distortions, without unnatural inhibitions, and how that ultimately drains us of our energy. And in being drained, that is where the disease and stress comes from. And that drainage comes from the extra emotional, mental, and physical energy required to put up with this restrictive resistance against what is otherwise naturally flowing expression and self-image. And therefore, it is the resistance, basically the resisting of the resistance. And even after that, if a person doesn't realize what has happened, then when that is basically entered into their personality, the propping up of this false persona requires much more energy than does, say, simply feeling and being and expressing the self without these false paradigms and interjected constructs for behavior and mental patterning that then overlays a personality for one's life. And so the main idea here is that a person can be unwittingly brought into this type of relationship, pulled in, basically the type of individuals who will bring these effects on a person. They're not the types of individuals that will let you know what they're doing before they do it. It's basically a form of parasitism, deception, and in a way, a type of, it's like a cleverly, it's like a distortion. I don't want to use the word scam, but it's the same concept, just in energetic terms. I'd say it's an illusion, a deception, maybe there's a better term than scam. It's basically a person is kind of sociopathic in nature to do these things, and when that individual they contain these they contain the results, the effects of such parasitic behavior or interference in their life, and so then it sheds off, it influences and threatens the stability of another individual. So it operates like a virus, like a mind virus. The individual doesn't have to know what they're doing. It's a result of instability to the point where they can simply be following unconscious orders, if you will, unconscious paradigms regarding society, social moralism or social morality and moral relativism, where we define what's acceptable and what's not based upon what others around us define that as, or their behavior or the higher authority. And so people who fall prey to that may not realize what they're doing and what's happening to them. However, the effects are the same, and that is basically the original self, the original processing of emotions and thought processes or mental processes. They get overlaid. They are overlaid by these external constructs, and they're externally introduced, pretty much similar to using a USB drive to introduce a virus to a computer system, and then it distorts the original information. Just like a body, it reconstructs parts of the personality to enable the reproduction of that same patterning, which isn't original to the whole, and then it utilizes the original connections, relationships, desires, or assets to then reproduce and share or spread that viral load to others that are influentially proximal to that infected system. And so, of course, eventually, when the virus runs its course, the original, or the host, is either very weakened or dies completely. And so that's what we're witnessing in society now, as a type of confusion, a deceptive behavior. So to conclude this, we're basically in a time where people are realizing there is this kind of mass parasitism effect in society, and there has been a weakening. People aren't really in the best situation. However, once we get over this process, we begin to understand the information that was being kept to us, the knowledge and the empathy and the power in that, and through this we return to power. And so there's a lot that is taking place as far as these old systems crumbling, kind of like sand in between people's fingers, because these systems aren't designed to support truth and to promote self-awareness. They're designed to more or less serve a purpose that keeps a select group of people in power, and that's no longer feasible in the given power structure, where those people will either get out of control and the power that is being handled is handled in a way that's unsustainable and can't happen, or people are quick enough mentally to realize what's happening and take steps to pretty much try and return to the power automatically or under their own accord. And so we're watching this happen in society as we speak. And we're kind of watching it, like I've said before, as it's the same as an addict going through withdrawal, where the people will cling to their wound, their emotional scar, their parasitic responses. They'll cling to those behaviors, those patterns, and they won't want to admit that there's a problem. And those who are entirely entrenched in this parasitic behavior, these so-called sociopaths, they are more afraid of being discovered than they are of losing their great power. However, because of the nature of the addiction, they don't have the power, if you will, to disable that addiction. But that's also, in a way, not fair, because there are these power systems where everyone is basically controlled and kept an eye on. They keep an eye on each other because it's serving a larger purpose of feeding power through these organizations. And so then they become kind of like a dysfunctional maybe hierarchy, where they start to turn on each other before they start to sort out their own issues and kind of integrate into a larger system, or maybe begin to heal, because they're willing to sacrifice one another, at least in the fundamental core of that system, willing to sacrifice one another instead of coming to light of this truth and basically helping the world heal and helping themselves heal. But the idea behind that is that the more that goes on, the more suffering there will be for everyone, because there is no real way out of that. What they're hiding from is the release of technology that allows people to look into time and to go back and basically finalize what began, or what begins in a few years from now, which is basically the time war, excuse me. Because at that point, everything begins anew and we finalize the whole occurrence. But the whole point is that we've been going through it because it has not happened yet, because they've been doing everything they can using this technology to prevent it from starting. Because once it starts, it's basically over. Very confusing, but that's what's going on. And the idea is once this information is out, people are no longer able to be tricked. The whole system is seen for what it is. It's a power inequality, kind of like the wealth inequality. And once people are given access to technologies as well as knowledge, they can literally shield themselves through time, and it kind of works as a retrocausality as far as affecting or influencing the past, which is how this whole society is entangled or convoluted in this type of false paradigm or matrix reality construct where the flow of history is more or less artificial or deceptive. And so the idea is once the same tools and methods are used to heal, that changes these occurrences in history, and they know that, and so they're kind of like living it up while they can. And there is a whole host of understanding about whether that's the end of days when they finally give up the show, they're actually going to basically end the world, or however that's going to work out. There's a whole bunch of theories and understandings, but the point is, that when the information comes out, the people return to power, and they have the ability to correct the disturbances in time and space and consciousness, and this is actually the deconstruction of that false paradigm, or the false light matrix system, what's called the false light matrix. And just to clarify again, there's only one real retro-causal effect, which is when something can actually change in the past, and that's when the whole thing, everything, is returned to the way it was before they began playing with technology. There's one retrocausal effect, there's one change, there's one time that it happens, and once it does, it's done forever.